And we're live. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Austin Petersen here, former presidential candidate for the Libertarian Party. Nice to see you all. And surprise, I'm going to give you guys a little live stream, a little holiday treat. Happy holidays, Merry Christmas, whatever holiday you're celebrating. Happy Hanukkah, whatever holiday you're celebrating. I hope you're having a great holiday season. I've been taking a little bit of time off from podcasting and live streaming to spend some time with my family and some friends and get a little rest and relaxation. It's been a pretty rough year. 2016, man, it's been a hell of a year. But there was a topic that came up in my head today that I thought would be a good one to discuss with you, to open a conversation up with everyone about, and that is the question of what do Donald Trump and Ayn Rand have in common? And I chose these two specifically because Donald Trump is the real issue of what we're going to talk about here, but it's also kind of a sideways angle for me to talk a little bit about myself too. We're going to talk about me because why not? Because this is about ego. We're talking about the question of the ego. Now, we all know that Donald Trump has an enormous ego. Nobody would, I think even he would agree with that. And most people might say, oh, that's a problem, that's a bad thing. A lot of libertarians, maybe they wouldn't necessarily, right? But when you look at his more boorish behavior, of course, the decorum is slightly lacking. But I wanted to talk about the subject because I think that Donald Trump has something that libertarians don't have. And I think that a lot of libertarians actually don't like what Donald Trump has that they don't have. And we're going to talk about the psychology of it. And I'll bring this all back together once we talk about this in light of recent news. Now, yesterday, this issue came up because yesterday I posted in, there's an AP for President group that started in the wake of my campaign. It's now a group, it's called Austin Petersen for President, and it still exists. There's a little over 5,000 people in there. And there's a lot of discussion about policy issues, talk about politics, and we make jokes, laugh, share memes, and things like that. You know how it is. But yesterday I posted something because there's been a lot of rancor in the group. There's been a lot of anger. People have been fighting a lot, and that's what happens with libertarians. We tend to have a lot of infighting. Most other groups do too. Socialists have infighting, communists have infighting, conservatives have infighting. But it seems like maybe it's because libertarians are my world, so I see it up close and in person. So it seems like it's much worse than it is perhaps in other factions. But since I'm not a socialist and not hanging out with socialists, of course I have no clue if it's better or worse. But I want to talk about the question of ego simply because I asked my people, I said, so what is the one thing that you disagree with me on policy-wise, and why do you still support me even though, you disagree with me on, immigration or abortion, or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But most of the responses weren't a policy difference that libertarians had with me. Most of the differences that libertarians had with me, or the problem that they had with me, was based on my ego. And so that was a question, of course, that I posited yesterday, and so I should expect that kind of a reaction. But I wanted to address it simply because I think that it reveals a severe weakness in libertarian psychology, libertarian thought, the libertarian movement, the liberty movement itself. And I think that it's a lack of self-confidence. You see, some time ago, Ayn Rand, when she wrote about libertarians, she was rather dismissive of us. And that seems queer because it makes you think, well, why would Ayn Rand, who praised the virtues of capitalism and virtue, why is it that many libertarians would reject Ayn Rand? Well, a lot of libertarians do it because they just thought she was hateful, they thought she was too proud, too arrogant, too egotistical, too selfish. And those are a lot of the things that I think are great about her. And I want to read to you a quote from her before I read my post that was in that group so we can talk about the questions of what I think are some of the problems, the psychology of the libertarian movement, and I'll tie this all into Donald Trump. But Ayn Rand, she was a Russian immigrant. Don't build that wall. She came from Russia in 1926, and she founded a movement that was called Objectivism, that embraces the achievements of humanity. She said, quote, "My philosophy in essence is the concept of man as a heroic being, with his own happiness as the moral purpose of his life, with productive achievement as his noblest activity, and reason as his only absolute." And a lot of people said, Austin, you're running for office, it's very egotistical of you to think that you could do something like that to run for president. You never run for anything lower. Of course, they would say that you're being selfish in doing so because it was Gary Johnson's time, or you need to stand aside for people who have more time in the movement or who have more experience, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But of course, the answer is that I didn't do it just selfishly, but I did do it selfishly in some respect. Why? Because I believe in self-defense, using electoral politics as a method of self-defense. I was fighting for my own liberty. I was fighting for my own freedoms, as well as the freedoms of everyone else. Because when you're protecting the rights of the individual, you're protecting the rights of the collective. So there was a little bit of selfishness there, simply because I thought it would be a good thing to do, to fight to lower my income taxes, to fight to have a less restrictive immigration policy, to fight for ending the war on drugs and things like that. These are selfish things. I want to be able to have lower prescription drug costs. I want to end the war on drugs for selfish reasons as well, not just to help other people. And I think that that's a good and virtuous reason to run, but it is a tad selfish, of course. I'm fighting for my own freedom as well as the freedom of others. But the thing, I posted this on my Facebook today. This was about Donald Trump, and I was talking about his ego specifically, and what he has that libertarians don't have. We're going to talk about Friedrich Nietzsche here in a minute, just as well, if you're a big Nietzsche fan. This is all philosophy stuff, so if you're a big philosophy nerd, this is for you. If you're not, well, it's not for you. And while I'm pulling up this post, I thought you guys would want to see. I know you guys are big fans of the Make Taxation Theft hat, and if you guys want to know where you can get it, right there, floating below, is the website. That's at threadsofliberty.com. You can see it right over there, and you guys can get one of those hats. I think you can still get them in time for Christmas, so if you order it today, you should get it in time for the holidays. But listen to this post that I made today. Let me talk about it. I said that the problem that many libertarians, not all libertarians, some libertarians, and a lot of them, have with the problem that many libertarians have with Donald Trump and his policies isn't his policies. It's his attitude. The man has got swagger. You can't deny that. Also, they don't like the fact that he's a winner. And many of these libertarians prefer to be losers. And they despise those who have the gall to try to do what others can't or others won't. And let me say that again. Many libertarians despise Donald Trump, not for his policies, but they don't like him because of his attitude. Now, he goes over the line quite a bit. So a lot of the things that he said, I think, are boorish and unattractive. But then a lot of times he says things that I think show he's got guts. He's got chutzpah. He's really showing that he is a strong alpha male. He's a strong leader. And libertarians tend to despise leaders. Well, we have our leaders and our archons, of course, but we tend to despise people who display those kinds of traits. Not all of us, not all libertarians. Many libertarians do. I was sitting down, I was talking to Jason Stapleton yesterday. We were talking about some of the issues with the liberty movement. And I told him, I was like, when I was running for office, there was a group of people that were actively working against me, but they weren't doing it because they didn't like my policies. They were doing it because they didn't like my attitude and because I conveyed the type of personality traits that Donald Trump has. Not over the top necessarily as much as he is, but they didn't like that I had this stink of winning on me, this idea that I wanted to win. A lot of people said, Austin, well, you can't win. You're not going to win. We just need to get into debates. We just need to get this, blah, 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 blah. That's not how you fight a war, ladies and gentlemen. That's not how you advance down the field. Now, the mentality, the psychology here is important. You may think that you may not be able to win. The odds may be against you. But in order to win the war, you got to win some battles. And you got to be able to fight. You got to fight to win. Otherwise, you're never going to win this battle, so you could win that battle. I mean, this is classic Sun Tzu. You have to be able to divide your forces and head your way up the trench line. And the problem with many libertarians, this is what I was telling Jason, is that a lot of libertarians do not want to win, and that's for many reasons. One of the reasons I think, is that there's this sort of hipster mentality, right? They want to be libertarian before it was cool, and also that they're afraid that if a libertarian does win, they say, well, what's going to happen if there's a crash and there's a financial crisis? Libertarians will get blamed for all of our problems, right? They'll get blamed for if the markets crash if there's a libertarian in office. So we don't want to see a libertarian in office because we don't want to be blamed for this, which I think is a very weak attitude. It's the slave mentality that Friedrich Nietzsche talked about, which we're going to discuss here in just a few minutes. But yeah, a lot of them do prefer to be losers. I don't know if you remember high school. I used to sit at the loser table at high school, and I would sit there. And I remember having experiences with people, and I realized that they had the same kind of exclusionary attitude that the popular kids table had. Right? They didn't want, you can't sit here, that kind of an attitude. And I realized that these people were just as snobbish as the elites. They were just as snobbish as the people who were at the popular kids table, right? And they didn't want to change because they were comfortable there. I think many libertarians are comfortable losing, right? And they're comfortable with infighting because infighting is a lot easier than going and taking the fight to the enemy, right? And we'll discuss this again in just a second. I want to read to you the post that I made, kind of refuting some of my critics who were talking about the problems that they have with my attitude. I said, I know yesterday the biggest issue that you had with me wasn't a policy issue at all, it was my attitude. Those of you who have met me in person are the only ones that have a true snapshot of my personality, so there's that. Also, I prefer not to fake humility, since I have fully embraced Randian and Nietzsche's morality on individualism and egoism. I despise the slave mentality of American culture that prizes humility over bravado and strength. I've always thought that libertarians rejecting Ayn Rand was a mistake because Atlas Shrugged is an excellent testimony for the capitalist mentality of personal achievement and a strong sense of self-worth. Socialism is the idea that we must humble ourselves to the collective. Capitalism is the idea that we serve the collective proudly, honorably, and with full awareness of the importance of the role of the market leader. Now, I may despise hero worship, but I still have my own archons, and almost none of them are humble men or women. That may not sit well with some, but I won't lie long in the grave before somebody says, yeah, he was sometimes a butt chunk, but he was a proud man with no regrets. So I'm saying you need to be proud of yourselves, and you need to free yourselves, libertarians, of this slave mentality that we have. And I think that you're going to be a lot happier, and what you're going to realize is that the people who don't care for your attitude are often only projecting their own insecurities anyway. That's their problem, not yours. Now, Ayn Rand was terrific. She had a great quote. She said that ego is the fountainhead of human progress. What does that mean? Well, in order to achieve incredible, spectacular things, you have to believe that you can. You have to believe in your own potential for greatness in order to achieve it. Now, a lot of people who are great people will be humble. Most of the time, they're just faking it, right? They're just faking humility because they know that that's what the American people want. Now, where did this mentality come from? Friedrich Nietzsche thinks that it comes from Christianity. He lays the blame at Christianity. And he defined the master-slave morality in this way. He says that this is a central theme of his work. He says the slave morality values things like kindness, humility, and sympathy, while master morality values pride, strength, and nobility. Master morality weighs actions on a scale of good or bad consequences, unlike slave morality, which weighs actions on a scale of good to evil. All right? Master-slave morality does not take into account human emotions. For Nietzsche, a particular morality is inseparable from popular culture, meaning that a culture's language, codes and practices, narratives, and institutions are informed by the struggle between these two moral structures. Now, the essence of master morality is nobility. Other qualities that are often valued in master morality are open-mindedness, courage, truthfulness, trust, and an accurate sense of one's self-worth. Master morality begins in the noble man with the spontaneous idea of the good. Then the idea of bad develops as what is not good. The noble type of man experiences itself as determining values. It does not need approval, right? Screw the haters in a sense. It judges what is harmful to me is harmful in itself. It knows itself to be that which first accords honor to things. It is value creating in its own. In this sense, the master morality is the full recognition that oneself is the measure of all moral truths. Insofar as something is helpful to the strong-willed man, it is like what he values himself. Therefore, the strong-willed man values such things as good because they aid him in a lifelong process of self-actualization through the will to power. Now that sounds like Donald Trump to me. It sounds like Ayn Rand. This is what we're talking about here. Is if you have a will to power, then you can achieve it only by accepting a value set that is one of personal greatness, one that Ayn Rand believed in. But if you think that libertarians are going to be able to accomplish this, well, we've got a bit of a wall between it, because of course libertarians tend to want to disperse power. They want power in the individual, of course. But when you're talking about running for office, you are expressing power over others. And that is why I think libertarians have such a hard problem many times with getting elected, with advancing good candidates, and with advancing their message, because they do not have a will to power. They do not have what Judge Napolitano calls the libido dominandi, the lust to dominate. And of course, the people who do have the libido dominandi, the people who do want to dominate the rest of us, have no problem running for office, getting elected, and then passing laws that lord over the rest of us. Now, what is the slave morality? The slave morality does not aim at exerting one's will by strength, but by careful subversion. It does not seek to transcend the masters, but to make them slaves as well. Sounds like Atlas Shrugged, doesn't it? The essence of slave morality is utility. The good is what is most useful for the whole community, not the strong. Nietzsche saw this as a contradiction. Since the powerful are few in number compared to the masses of the weak gain power by corrupting the strong into believing that the causes of slavery are evil, as are the qualities they originally could not choose because of their weakness. By saying humility is voluntary, slave morality avoids admitting that their humility was in the beginning forced upon them by a master. Biblical principles of turning the other cheek, humility, charity, and pity are the result of universalizing the plight of the slave onto all humankind, and thus enslaving the masters as well. The democratic movement is the heir to Christianity, is what Nietzsche says. The political manifestation of slave morality because of its obsession with freedom and equality. And so I don't agree, of course, with everything that Friedrich Nietzsche says, but he makes very good points. And it's important, another famous philosopher said that it is the mark of an educated mind that you can entertain an idea without necessarily accepting it, of course. And I believe that was Aristotle. But this is the problem that we have in the libertarian movement, is that the ability to get elected, the ability to advance an idea, a character set, is hindered by the fact that we have embraced the slave mentality. And that's because we demand humility. And that's why we tended to love Ron Paul, right? We liked Ron Paul because he was humble, right? He had the type of attitude like a caring grandfather, and we thought this was what would be the best for the country. But the country didn't agree with us, because the country actually wanted someone who would keep the country strong. And people, for right or wrong, believed that Ron Paul would endanger our national security. They thought that his policies were weak, and they thought that he would put us in more danger. Now, again, I don't necessarily agree with that, but this is the mentality of the people. So think about it, humility, right? Humility. So most politicians, they will feign humility in public, right? And they do that because it's popular, right? You always want to try and appear, as if you're humble, you're not self-serving, you're just trying to help people, blah, 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 blah. But the reality is that behind the scenes, these are arrogant egomaniacs and sociopaths and narcissists, many of the people who are our elected representatives. And so there is some danger there, okay? So what do you want? I mean, really, essentially, libertarians, what do you want? Do you want a politician who pretends to be humble, who lies to you, who tells you things that you want to hear? Or do you want someone who is proud, someone who believes that running for office is not only for the good of everyone, but the good of themselves, for their own freedom? And that is going to be a big hurdle for us, just simply because we as libertarians tend to despise people who displays the kinds of trait that Donald Trump has, because it goes against sort of many of our core instincts. Right? There is an egalitarianism that is rampant in libertarianism, right? The idea that it's sort of a leftist idea, right? That all humans must be created equal, usually through the force of government. But most capitalists, most objectivists, almost all, I believe all objectivists, And many libertarians believe in the greatness of the individual, right? The selfishness of man is what brings the bounty. The cornucopia of capitalism is what feeds the poor, because with the excess that we have when we have traded with one another and we've enriched ourselves, is that we can then take that and spread that across the country or across the culture. But we should be proud of ourselves, libertarians. We shouldn't be the loser table anymore. We shouldn't adopt the slave mentality. There's nothing wrong necessarily with being humble, but I think that there is something wrong with demanding someone else emulate your behavior in such a way. And I wish that we had more libertarians who are proud of themselves. And we've got a lot of libertarians who are very arrogant, of course, right? And I think somebody made a joke, I think Paul Tuma made the joke today. He said that if arrogance was a rocket fuel, libertarians would have colonized Alpha Centauri by now. So really good joke, Paul, and it's probably true. So there is a line, of course, between arrogance and ego. But of course, most of the times, whenever you're trying to do something great, if you're not pissing someone off, you're probably not doing anything important. And what do I mean when I say that? Anytime you try and do anything great, anything that's going to disrupt, like, capitalism is very disruptive. So if you create a new product, there are going to be a lot of people who are angry at you. A lot of these people might be paid trolls from your competitors who are trying to take you down because they don't like the fact that you're eating into their market share. That happens with libertarians, maybe libertarian commentators. A lot of people want to do what I do or do what other libertarian commentators do, so they think that the shortest way to do that is to try and destroy people like myself, so that they can hopefully get some attention for themselves, and maybe one day they might be a celebritarian. I know it sounds stupid and weird, but it's true. It does happen, and if you're in the libertarian movement, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. But I think there was a really good quote by Abraham Lincoln, who said that you cannot expect to build up the weak by tearing down the strong. And that's not what we should be aiming at doing. We want a strong libertarian movement, and that means we want strong leaders, and those strong leaders should be proud, they should be happy. And we shouldn't necessarily be trying to tear them down, unless, of course, they're destructive to the cause, which some are. But how you delineate that, again, is a bit subjective, and I will admit that. And I do have my personal flaws. Everyone does, and maybe arrogance is one of those things that you have to look out for. But the difference between someone like myself and someone who is has a concrete arrogant personality is that I'm willing to do self-reflection. And what that means is that when I have been proven wrong, I will change my opinion. When someone gives me enough evidence to confront me, to say, hey, Austin, this is an issue, then I think that it's right that you should change your personality. You shouldn't just be unnecessarily arrogant. But again, it's a little subjective, a little bit of a moral gray area there. But we do need good, strong leaders. And the reason why Donald Trump won is because the American people wanted a strong leader. They wanted someone who would go out there and represent them with power and with strength, because that's what the United States has always been about. Now, I think we project our power militarily in an overly expansive manner. I think that the United States has been a bit of a bully around the world. We've been policemen of the world, and I think that we definitely need to dial back on that. So yes, it can go too far. But you cannot achieve greatness. You cannot do great things, again, if you do not believe in yourself and believe that you can accomplish great things. So we've got to get away from the loser mentality. We've got to stop despising people who display strength or courage or aggressiveness, simply because I think that these are some of the qualities that are lacking. This is a bit embarrassing, but during one of the presidential debates, John McAfee asked me a question. We got to ask each other questions. And John McAfee, who was trying to slip me up, asked me a question. He's like, Austin, where can I get some of your pyramids? And of course, it was meant to embarrass me and meant to kind of throw me under the bus there and see how well I would react. But I turned it around. I made it a counterattack, not on John, but on the libertarian movement. This is what sometimes makes me so unpopular, because I'm willing to call out my own, which needs to be done in every movement, including the alt-right, including the alt-left, including the socialist movement, including the People's Republic, the Judean People's Front. You do have to police your own in some sense. But how did I respond to that question that was meant to trip me up? The question, when he asked it, I instantly started getting flustered and everyone was laughing. It made me think about some of the problems that we have. One of the biggest problems that we have in the libertarian movement is a lack of females. Well, that could be due to many factors. But one of the things that I said was that women admire strong men. Women like strong men, for the most part. Not totally. But that is one of the reasons why so many women voted for Donald Trump, because they didn't care about all the boorish, hateful things that he said when he went too far. They liked him because he was a real man. They liked him because he was a strong man, and because he displays courage, because he's aggressive, because he's a business leader, because the man gets stuff done. And women like that. So I said in my response to that question that the problem with the libertarian movement is we have too many beta male losers, people who think that the slave mentality should apply to everyone in the movement, who just want to tear down the strong. These are people that I think are holding us back. And maybe if we had a lot better, stronger men, men who had the ability to lead, we would have more women in this movement, because that might be more attractive to them. Now, I'm not trying to say that women are attracted to the movement just because of men. That's absolutely not true. But I do think that in the libertarian movement, we suffer from a severe lack of testosterone. We could use a shot of adrenaline and testosterone in this libertarian movement so that we can get stuff done. Because, well, quite frankly, ladies and gentlemen, we have not gotten much accomplished since the party was founded in 1971. What successes do we really have to look at? A lot of people are looking at the 3% of the national vote that we got. That's nothing, okay? That's nothing, and it's not going to increase until we change our attitude. See, Gary Johnson was universally despised by the American electorate because they saw him as weak, they saw him as ignorant, they saw him as, just gawky and strange. Now, that's mean, but that's what people believe. That's what people thought. But it doesn't matter if it's mean or rude or arrogant or hateful to say those kinds of things about Gary Johnson. That is an accurate perception of what the American voters said. They just said that they just thought that he seemed a little flimsy, a little weak. And that's not what people look for when they're looking for a commander-in-chief. That's not what they're looking for when they're looking for someone for the Department of Defense. As a matter of fact, I saw today that Ron Paul was criticizing the Secretary of Defense pick that Trump has, General James Mattis, Mad Dog Mattis, Warrior Monk Mattis. He was criticizing him, especially because some of the comments that Mattis had said, where he said, he enjoys killing people. In context, though, what Mattis was saying is that he was talking about the type of men that beat their wives, people, the Muslims that practice a severe form of Sharia, where they repress women in their culture. And Mattis was saying that, yeah, I enjoy killing these people. Well, you need a Marine that enjoys killing people. That is their job. That is quite literally their job. And you do not want someone as the Secretary of Defense who is a pacifist, right? That's not what that role is supposed to be. Also, just so you know, Ron, the Department of Defense actually doesn't set the policy. It's the politicians that set the policy. And so I do hope that General James Mattis will be confirmed, because those are the types of leaders that we need in that type of a position. And another topic that someone brought up the other day, which caused a lot of contention, someone said, Austin, would you ever put a neocon in your cabinet? And I said, and I wouldn't have probably said this a few years ago, but I said yes. Now, why would I do something like that? Well, one, because I want to keep an eye on him. Two, because I would want to listen to their foreign policy knowledge, because neoconservatives tend to be much more knowledgeable on foreign policy than libertarians do. There's maybe 5 to 10 foreign policy libertarians in the whole world. And so in order to build a libertarian cabinet made completely of libertarians, well, I don't think you could possibly do it if you're president of the United States. There just aren't that many people, and you couldn't just hire someone from a think tank, because they wouldn't have any practical policy experience in order to run those institutions. This is what, even Ben Carson is in trouble for being picked for the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, because he doesn't have a background in that, even though he's been a brilliant brain surgeon. But you need to put people in their right place. Now, why would I have a neoconservative in my cabinet? Well, the answer is also because I want someone to call me out on my BS. I want someone who is going to tell me when they think that I'm wrong. And I see Donald Trump doing many of those things. I see him looking at people like Mitt Romney for Secretary of State. He might not pick him, but that is a good sign to me. That's a healthy sign. That's someone who's not just surrounding themselves with yes men. That's someone who's surrounding themselves with people who are willing to contradict you. And so look at what Donald Trump says, right? He seems arrogant, seems proud, boastful, arrogant, right? All of these things. But then what is he doing? He's going out there and he's talking to people that he disagrees with. He's looking at placing people who he does not agree with in certain positions or who have contradicted him. And that is a healthy sign. That's what you want, right? We want to be, as libertarians, we would like to be in charge, right? So we're the ones making decisions. And if there are neoconservatives or social democrats or anything like that who work for you, you're going to be the one who calls the shots. And you're not going to have an echo chamber, right? That's the problem, is that I think we have too much of an echo chamber. And libertarians, we're very dovish, right? And that's a good thing, right? We need a less militarist foreign policy. We need a less interventionist foreign policy. But you can't be a pacifist and be the president of the United States. You just can't. You have to be able to defend the Constitution, which sometimes means that you must resort to force. That force should be defensive force, not aggressive force. But force is sometimes necessary in order to defend life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So I say to you, my libertarian friends, it's time for us to nut up or shut up. And it's time for us to get a shot of testosterone in the arm. And it's time for us to stop tearing down the strong and thinking that is going to lift up the weak. All right, so that's it. Just a little fun, quick holiday stream. Maybe if you're lucky, I'll do some holiday carols. Remember last year when I was running for president and I was singing Christmas carols and we were having a whole lot of fun. I was raising money for the presidential campaign, like $5 at a time, singing things like Deck the Halls and stuff like that. Well, maybe I'll do something like that for you guys next week if you're lucky. But if you want to get a really cool Christmas present for the libertarian friends in your life, you can go to threadsofliberty.com, get your Make Taxation Theft hat. Also, we've got cool shirts. There's a Make Taxation Theft Again shirt. You're going to want this, of course. People think that you're wearing a Donald Trump hat. It's actually really funny. I was in the polls, I was voting, and a guy came up behind me, one of the poll watchers, and he's like, "Sir, you can't wear that hat." And then he realized what it said. He thought it was a Donald Trump hat, but it said Make Taxation Theft Again. Later, he shook my hand and said some nice things. But we've also got my famous quote about, I want to live in a world where gay married couples can protect their marijuana fields with fully automatic rifles, and you can get that on a shirt, and you can get that again at threadsofliberty.com. So did you miss me, guys? Do you want to see some Christmas carols next month? Well, leave me some comments in the live stream below. I'll go ahead and troll through there later and answer any questions or comments that you guys might have. I will be back full-time starting in January, revving up the Stonegate Institute, my new 501c4, as well as Stonegate PAC and Loki PAC. We're going to be getting those things in full gear starting first thing in January, so don't forget to look out for some cool new projects and trainings that we've got coming out of there. And don't forget to come back every single day to your home for economic freedom and personal liberty at thelibertarianrepublic.com.